When Dan Orlovsky speaks, a lot of people stop and listen, especially when he drops a prediction that feels like a direct jab at Steelers fans. And what if I told you that another big name at ESPN agrees with him? Meanwhile, in the draft, two unexpected picks shook up the NFL behind the scenes and left Pittsburgh fans with a big question mark. There's a decision here that could change the course of the season. Go ahead and hit that like button because these updates are going to stir up some serious buzz. All right, buckle up, folks, and because former NFL QB Dan Orlovsky just dropped a cold bucket of reality on Steelers Nation. Popping up on ESPN, Orlovsky didn't sugarcoat a thing when it came to Mason Rudolph potentially leading the charge for Pittsburgh this season. His words? "I think you're staring 0-6 in the face with Mason." Yikes. Orlovsky went on to say this offense is basically just DK Metcalf out wide right now, which, yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But let's pump the brakes for a second. Pittsburgh's early schedule isn't exactly a murderer's row. Week 1 kicks off with the Jets and Justin Fields' new look, sure, but still the same 5-11 team from last year. Then it's back home for the Seahawks, followed by trips to face a rebuilding Patriots squad and the Vikings in Ireland. After a bye in Week 5, it's division time with the Browns and Bengals, with that Cincinnati game coming on Thursday night. Now here's the twist. Only one of those teams, the Vikings, even sniffed the playoffs last season. So the idea that the Steelers would go winless in that stretch seems like a stretch. Yeah, Mason Rudolph starting is far from ideal. He started just 10 games in 6 years. But this roster isn't made of scraps either. There's enough talent across the board that they shouldn't just roll over even with QB questions. Still, ESPN's Louis Riddick chimed in backing Orlovsky, pointing out that in each of those first 4 matchups, the opposing QB situation looks better than Pittsburgh's. "Every one of those teams has a quarterback you'd take over the Steelers," he said, basically calling it a major uphill battle. Of course, this whole convo might get tossed in the shredder if Aaron Rodgers actually signs with the Steelers talk about flipping the script, but until then, yeah, the Rudolph scenario is something the front office has to consider. Bottom line? If Mason ends up under center, Pittsburgh might not be lighting up the scoreboard, but let's not bury them just yet. The guy's got a hill to climb, no doubt, but 0-6 feels more like panic talk than reality. Are the Steelers really in that bad of a spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hold up, because that draft pick, that's where things got even wilder. Well. The Steelers shook up the 2025 NFL draft in a way no one saw coming, and the ripple effects? Let's just say they sent the whole league into a frenzy. Holding the 21st overall pick, Pittsburgh was sitting in a prime spot with a couple of notable quarterbacks still on the board. Cam Ward had already gone number 1 to the Titans, but shockingly, both Shedder Sanders and Jackson Dart slipped all the way to the Steelers pick. With their QB situation being one of the murkiest in the league, it felt like the stars were aligning. Time to snag your next franchise guy, right? Wrong. Instead of reaching for a passer in what scouts had dubbed a meh QB class, the Steelers went defense grabbing DT Derek Harmon. That move might have made sense in the war room, but outside, chaos. The moment Pittsburgh passed on a quarterback, phones around the league lit up. Teams that had passed earlier suddenly saw an opening to jump back into round 1 and snag a signal caller. The New York Giants were first to pounce. According to ESPN's Jordan Rannon, Giants GM Joe Schoen had already been eyeing a trade-up scenario, but didn't want to give up too much. When the Steelers passed at 21, it was go time. While Schoen tried to work something out directly with Pittsburgh, it didn't click, and honestly, that was a blessing in disguise. Instead, the Giants worked out a deal with the Houston Texans at pick 25, coughing up a second-rounder, the 99th pick, and a 2026 third to go get Jackson Dart. A hefty price, but if Dart pans out, that trade's going to look like a steal. Meanwhile, the Steelers are still stuck in QB purgatory. They're reportedly waiting on Aaron Rodgers to make up his mind, but let's be real, Rodgers is a short-term patch, not a long-term fix. Pittsburgh might have passed on Dart, but unless Rodgers signs and plays at MVP level, the front office could end up kicking themselves. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, though. Word is the Steelers are loading up for 2026 with 12 draft picks, so maybe they're planning to swing big next year and finally lock down that elusive franchise quarterback. But until then, this Mason Rudolph-Aaron Rodgers limbo could get real uncomfortable real fast. Stuck between Mason Rudolph and the hope for Aaron Rodgers is like living on a razor's edge. And letting a potential future QB slip away? That price may come due. Subscribe to the channel to follow every step of the Steelers' journey.